how far we have to go. So without further ado, our County Administrator, Mr. Jason Boyd.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I think you took my first slide or two. I want to first start by thanking the Commissioners and the Sheriff's Office for their leadership the past few years on what's been a very complicated and timely project here. The goal of today's presentation, it's about 3.5 hours, I'm kidding, is to provide a detailed review of our timeline, the process by which we've been working, the team we've assembled, our project goals, our current status, and our go-forward strategy. In addition to the Sheriff and the Commissioners, I want to just take a moment. There's a number of people who've been very important to this project thus far. Chief Izzo and the Sheriff's team, Captains Vanjo and Simpson and Backnicki, Lieutenant Eldredge and Michelle, among the myriad of other Sheriff's Office folks who participated in the planning the past couple years. The Lake County Community Corrections Board, we've had a couple presentations over the past couple years. For those who don't know, the Community Corrections Board is a committee that meets twice a year, includes all of the judges throughout the county, both municipal judges and county judges, the county prosecutor and some other representatives. Thanks to Auditor Galloway, Treasurer Zern, Joel and I and Zach have had meetings with them as we wrap our arms around the financing plan. Thanks to the folks here on the 5th floor who've done whatever I need, whenever I need it throughout this process. It's a great group of folks. Thank Mr. Hackman and Mr. Colson and your team, Nina and Kelly and so on, for contract review. Mark Eiffelis and Paul Stefanko aren't here today. Mark and Paul, along with the Sheriff's folks, maintain the facility that we have today and do a heck of a job doing so, and we'll continue to do that in the future. And also the value they brought to the planning and design on kind of the structure and generators and you name it. I also want to thank Joel and Zach, notably the past 6 months on as we put the final touches, if you will, on the finance strategy and allowing me to get my arms around what is the largest capital investment in the history of the county from a general fund perspective. I also want to throw a thank you to Mr. Matus who provided a solid foundation for the budgetary practice by which the path we're going to take, excuse me. Last but not least, City Manager Doug Lewis, the City of Paynesville Council, and all their departments. They've been a pleasure to work with. The Sheriff and I were at the Planning Commission a week ago today, and I'll note our approvals there, but they've been a really excellent partner in navigating through the approval process, zoning, urban design, and so on. So really the past 10 years since I became administrator, one of my primary tasks is, along with, at that point in time, Chief Leon Bruno, now Sheriff Leon Bruno, was getting our arms around the public safety, so the current facility. So I have a couple slides here of what do we know, what the cards we've been dealt. And the Sheriff, if I get out of bounds here, feel free to step in. And I should have begun this conversation with, this will be published to the website today. I can get it to the media outlets and it'll be followed by a press release. But what we know is the facility opened in January of 1990 at a rating of 353 beds. In 90, we brought over 100 inmates. And so, which I'll get to some of the challenges associated with that. The current facility, and this is no secret, is often full and significant rehab is required. Our average daily population from the Sheriff's statistics is about 330 inmates, but it has not been unusual to have over 400 inmates in a jail that's licensed for 353 beds. So one can imagine the challenges that the corrections officers and the Sheriff's Office has when you have a surplus of inmates and how you house those individuals. Some of the challenges that I've learned from the Sheriff's Office in 1990, the male versus female inmates. We brought over about 10 females in 1990. Once again, there are times where we have 100 females in that facility. Once again, the operational challenges with that ratio. The number of misdemeanors versus felons. In 1990, the ratio was 2/3 misdemeanors, 1/3 felons. Today, that is inverted, where we have approximately 2/3 felons and 1/3 misdemeanors. Once again, the operational challenges of securing those particular facilities. And I'll briefly go through the next couple challenges that we know. Woefully inadequate medical facilities, the operational challenges with the mental and substance abuse of our inmates. I think the number, Sheriff, ranges 67% of the inmates have some sort of substance abuse or drug problem. How do we provide programming space, counseling space, and so on for those individuals? Woefully undersized kitchen and laundry areas for a facility of that size. I think that was never more apparent to me when we went to Wayne County and we got to look at, so that's in Detroit, at the size of their kitchen and laundry facilities. So we're looking forward to that. Additional need for adult probation. Chief Barry and his needs and the growth of his agency and what they need to provide the services to the community. And we think about the jail as the hardened facility, but what I've learned the past couple of years as I spent more time at the sheriff's office is what I'll call the soft side. Just the general office space, the lack of flexibility, the lack of conference room, training areas for SWAT, evidence storage, and so on. It just does not meet today's standards. Some more things that we know, and we've talked about this ad nauseum the past decade. We've had 3 major studies completed, and I won't get into the weeds and the results because we know where we're going. We had one completed in 2014. We had a facade evaluation in 2018, which Commissioner Hammerchick is very familiar with, and then we took another peek in 2019. Basically, we know the jail requires millions of dollars in renovations, and it needs to be replaced. All the mechanical systems, most of the mechanical systems are at the end of life, and renovating a jail that is often full just does not make fiscal sense over the long term. So I'll spend a few minutes on the project planning process. I think this is very important to understand the diligent nature by which we've taken thus far. As I noted, we've been working on this for the better part of 10 years, but I think things really kicked into gear in 2021 when the commissioners selected project management consultants to act as a owner's rep for the county, led by Jeffrey Applebaum, who's actually a Lake County resident. PMC came on board in the summer of 2021. In some early conversations, we talked about how are we going to deliver this project. We chose, it's called Bridging Design Build. So I think a lot of folks here in the county are familiar with the traditional method by which we build projects, and I'll use a sewer line, for example, where Randy's team or consultant will design a water line, give a cost estimate, put that out on the street for 30 days to bid it, and then every Wednesday at 11 a.m., Jen and Kathy will open bid documents, and typically the award goes to the lowest and or most qualified bidder. That delivery method is not the preferred method on a project of this scale and scope, so we chose the Bridging Design Build, which essentially, and I'll expand upon that, allows our architects and engineers who are designing the building to be teamed up early in the process with the guys and gals who will be swinging hammers early on, as opposed to waiting. So, and I'll expand upon what Gilbane is doing with our designers here in a moment. Step 2 was bringing on the architect. That process began in 2021. They are responsible for the program, the schematic design, and the detailed design, which I'll expand upon. The third step, which happened last November, was bringing on the design build team, which is essentially the contractor. The design build team is responsible for finalizing the construction documents, which most of us would call blueprints, and then issuing what's called the final GMP, Guaranteed Maximum Price. And that GMP contract will be forthcoming later this summer into the fall. And during this process, we've done the following items. We've continued to budget proactively for the build. We've looked at other sites. We've acquired property, Key Point, on a fee simple basis. As properties became available, we acquired those properties in direct proximity and adjacencies to the current footprint. We've renovated other offices in preparation for the move. We passed a resolution today with that, so the Public Defender's Office, some Prosecutor Colson's attorneys, we provided the space in preparation for clearing the proposed footprint, and we've maintained the current facility today to the tune of $200,000 to $300,000, sometimes $400,000 a year in what we've used as Band-Aids to keep the facility operational and in compliance with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction standards. Briefly, this is the team that we have assembled. I think this is a high quality team. Obviously, the county commissioners, along with the sheriff, are in the driver's seat, if you will. I noted project management consultants. Jeff Applebaum is our owner's rep. Jeff, along with his team of Ellis Katz, Amy, and a slew of other professionals behind the scenes, have been doing the project management on behalf of the county and myself. What does that include? You name it, they are doing it. Helping me with land acquisition, legal review, revised code compliance, contract preparation, and so on. So basically on that side, Jeff and his team will do a lot of the initial work. I will send that downstairs to Mr. Hackman and his team so that we have almost a duplication of review when it comes to legal matters, and it's been a great partnership with PMC. Our criteria architect, HOK, based out of St. Louis, offices in Chicago are where our primary team is located, led by Jason Wandersee and Rebecca Brand. I think the sheriff and chief will echo this statement. For those of you who don't know Rebecca, she's the project manager and has done a heck of a job keeping this project on task with upwards of 40 professionals on these calls and keeping us moving in the right direction. So with Rebecca, Ryan, Eric, and countless number of architects and engineers and designers on HOK's team, it's been very, very, very fruitful. K2M is another architect on the design team, the criteria architect, Scott Maloney, who's very familiar with the jail. Scott and K2M actually performed a few of the projects in 2014 and 2019, so he has a good familiarity with our project. And most recently, we've added our design builder, and Gilbane, the design build team, which is Gilbane out of Cleveland. K2M will shift to the design build team, and also a local firm, Lakeland Construction Group. So that is our team today moving forward. How did we get to the criteria architect? I'll briefly go through these slides. Back in 2021, PMC Consultants drafted a request for qualifications document. We posted that through December of 2021. In this room in November 29th, we held a pre-qualification conference where architectural firms, engineering firms could come here, and myself and the commissioners, I don't know if we all remember, but we gave a brief presentation on what our vision was in 2021. We then gave some time for firms to prepare proposals, culminating in 2 sets of interviews in early 22 and the ultimate selection in April of 22 of HOK Consultants to be our criteria architect. And I should note, all of this was done in conformance with the Ohio Revised Code in the procurement process. Same plan of attack to bring on the design build team. About a year ago now, PMC Consultants prepared a request for qualifications for design build services. We posted that in September, had another pre-qualification conference here last August. And in October, we received 2 proposals, one from Gilbane and one from PJ Dick, Pittsburgh, and with Independence Excavating. There aren't a tremendous amount of firms who build this type of structure. So quite frankly, we were excited that we got 2 really qualified proposals to review last fall. We conducted interviews in October of 2023 that included the commissioners, the sheriff, myself, PMC, and various department heads to do the evaluation. That resulted in a resolution about Thanksgiving of 2023 selecting Gilbane under our pre-construction services contract. The next couple slides, we'll get into the details of the HOK's primary responsibilities. They're listed here on these slides. In 2022, they spent a year on a program, and I'll get into what a program is. That then merged its way into schematic design and detailed design development. In the past year in these meetings, I've been using baseball acronyms. So the program is the first inning of the ball game, maybe the second inning. Schematic design is innings 3 and 4. Detailed designs are inning 5 and 6. So that would be the scope of work that HOK has been charged with the past 2 years. And we have just most recently completed the detailed design. So what is programming? Well, quite frankly, it's everything, and it's critical to the overall project's success. Essentially, HOK and their team took a deep dive into the commissioner's operations currently and what they need in the future. It's very important to understand that the program results in minimal maps. This is a series of spreadsheets and narrative that put forth what the future may look like, ultimately resulting in a square footage analysis and a final rough order of magnitude cost, which is our first look at kind of the arena in which we're in financially. During the program, we're looking at the site. Commissioner Hamerchick used this word future-proofing, and that stuck with me. We have countless planning meetings. I put plus or minus 2 a week. That's probably woefully low. I think we are on a call 3-4 times a week at this stage. We're looking at existing best management practices, precedents with other safety facilities. We're starting to get a feel on scale, the size, the massing, where it's going to be located, and as I noted, the rough order of magnitude. This is what a program results in. It's not maps, it's not blueprints. This is the cover sheet of the program in 2022, about September of 2022. And what you'll see are categories of areas within the Lake County Sheriff's Office and gross square footages. So at that point in time, we were looking at about a 200,000 square foot facility in the fall of 2022 at 504 beds. I will note the 504 beds have stayed, and as you'll see, the square footage number has increased as we've worked through the schematic design and detailed design. This particular slide is just a snapshot, and I think this program was 180 pages long. There is a detailed cut sheet for every square inch of this proposed facility. What I grabbed here is in the sheriff's suite, the detective bureau. The example of How much square foot do we need for copy area? How many square foot do we need for the conference room? Evidence storage, drug evidence. That's the level of detail that HOK and the Sheriff's Office got into during the program. We continue to look at our site. Obviously, this map represents the area that when we started the process, we owned in blue, plus or minus 5 acres here on the screen. Our goal during the program was to ensure that site would work, because we knew in the previous studies they said it would, but also begin the future-proofing process. As we continued through the program and learned that the site did work, and I'll show the following graphic, it became evident that when available on a fee simple basis, the county should consider acquiring extra property. The area in red indicates that initiative that we've really been working through the past 2 years. This map is dated because obviously we have acquired additional areas. For those you can't see it in red, the Chicago Redmond building we also have under our ownership. If there is one map that was produced in the program, it was this. And this looks something that a very elementary massing exercise. This is the lone map in the program. And basically what this does, or what this did, was it took this gross square footage and analyzed its capacity on the current plus or minus 5 acres that we had. It answered the question, confirmed the question that yes, indeed, a building of 200 to 210,000 square feet and the associated parking will work. Additionally, this map also gave us, a little additional push to examine that fee simple acquisition, as it called for future parking adjacent the Burger King and the current jail facility. As we concluded the program, we get into this rough order of magnitude cost. So let's put some timeline together. COVID 2020, 2021. This process is in 22. I would argue we're kind of coming out of COVID, but the construction market was very fluid at that point in time, still is. So we had the impact of the general market. What did the supply chain look like? Escalation and inflation, we're still dealing with that. Labor costs, and what is the value of time? So the deliverable in the program was a budget at 200,000 square feet of about $171 million. So that was our first glance at 200,000 square feet, plus or minus 3 stories at about $171, $72 million. We then proceed to schematic design. Okay, so we're in the second, third inning of the game, and here things are starting to take some shape. The building maybe is starting to come out of the ground. We are planning and designing ad nauseum floor plans, site circulation, landscaping, food and laundry layouts, central utility plant. Mark and Paul cannot be here. Maintaining and working on the infrastructure, Commissioner Hamercheck knows this, is a pain in the tail in that current building. This new building will have it's not standalone, but a central utility plant where all of the major mechanicals will be located. Security, both in and out of the jail. The sheriff's team spent a lot of time on that. What type of cell types? Prefab steel, concrete. We ultimately selected steel. The configuration of the cells. And then during the schematic design is the first time we start to hear the word value engineering, and we'll expand upon that. So some of the deliverables in a program. So now, we had Excel spreadsheets. Now the designers are taking those spreadsheets and putting each department of the sheriff's office into a block and start to stack those departments based on a square footage standpoint. So in this rendering, these squares are hard to read, but they say probation, medical, jail admin. So we start to look on a per floor basis, level 0, levels 1, 2, and 3, how things will stack and where various disciplines within the sheriff's office should be located. And it's hard to see, but we also get our first sense of height. So on this slide to the far right, there's an elevation of about 70 feet. We'll talk a little bit about that because I'll be in front of Paynesville City Board of Zoning Appeals this evening for a variance. This is another example of going from a spreadsheet to now we're starting to see this thing go live. This is a detailed sheet of what's called level 0. I quite frankly don't know why we don't call it the basement. The lingo started at level 0 2 years ago and we've stuck with it. But this is a slide that takes the blocks, puts them on just a piece of paper and looks at adjacencies. So for example, what you see on this particular slide are food service, the sheriff's warehouse, quartermaster, evidence, staff and fitness. Where should those particular uses go on level 0? And these building blocks were picked up and moved a number of times during the schematic design. And this exercise also occurred on floors 1, 2, and 3. This is our first look at parking during schematic design. We know we're at 210,000 square feet. We know what the city zoning code reads, so now we start looking at what is the parking needs of the sheriff proper, his ancillary vehicles, his employees, his visitors, juvenile court, so on and so forth. And this is where I'm going to just take a pause in the presentation and briefly talk about parking. It is probably one of my #1 complaints from employees. I have a different approach with parking. Parking will be a challenge over the next 3 years, but we are in a downtown urban core and we have plenty of parking. It's just not where people want. So I would respectfully ask that folks and agencies bear with us. We're going to supply some additional parking down the road, but just my quick editorial comment that there is plenty of parking in the downtown area. The entire commissioner staff walked for 3 years during the construction of this building. So that's just, and I'll have future correspondence on how we're going to address parking down the road. So I digress there a little bit. Continuing along on other variables that were examined. This is doesn't mean a lot. It didn't mean a lot to me when we started. I think one of the commissioners was in this meeting when we heard the words borrowed light. How do we get natural light into the building, and particularly the ranges for the inmates? So they looked at all 4 cardinal directions at various elevations, sun angles, and so on. So we maximized the amount of sunlight, i.e. borrowed light, into the building. Once again, just an example of the level of detail by which we were working. Future proof, we take a look at, should this building need to expand down the road? We looked at all 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. What are pros and cons, opportunities, and constraints to a future expansion, probably when we are all long and no longer around here. So just I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this particular slide, but the expansion plan in 50 years would be plan east or to the right toward the Burger King. Building character. I think we've heard a lot about how the current jail looks. Early on in the 3rd inning, we start having conversation of what should this thing look like. Using the city's design standards, their zoning code, and working off some precedents, existing structures in the downtown civic core. This particular building, our fabulous courthouses, City Hall, the churches, Morley Library. Those were the precedents that we provided to the designers to give them kind of our guardrails, if you will, what we want this facility to potentially look like. Duplicating the existing structure was not an option. I heard that loud and clear from the commissioners from day one. This is a prominent civic justice representation, and it should be treated as such, with all due respect that it's taxpayer dollars. We start to see our first site plan. So the graphic here, the dark gray area is the footprint. We have juvenile court plan left. You start to see in the lime green some buffer areas, the parking starting to take shape. There's also a sheriff's garage, which is located by the Buildings and Grounds facility. So this is our first look at the layout on the real estate that we've acquired. We also see the first glimpse of this thing coming out of the ground, the first vertical iteration. And this is literally the designers taking Sharpies and pens and listening to what we had to say as far as precedents in Morley Library and City Hall and architecture. So this is the first glimpse that we received of what this building may look like. That was followed during schematic design with our first computer rendering of the potential facility. And I think you will note right away, and I know we did as a design team, this does not scream jail. This has that civic presence of a library or a non-secure facility when indeed it is very secure. And finally, the schematic design ends with a budget. So this was the 100% schematic design budget provided, this was last fall, the fall of 2023. So here we can go right down to the bottom line, because that's what we all do, and we see, oh man, we're now at $217 million. Couple reasons for that. As we work through finalizing the program and into schematic design, we realized, the sheriff realizes there were additional spaces that we need now, and probably more importantly in the future. So we wanted to make sure that we programmed and designed for that in the schematic design. Secondly, you will notice on this budget, we have a 15% hard cost contingency. That is $25 million. That you will see in subsequent slides. As we progress through the design and engineering, we eliminate unknowns. When we eliminate unknowns, we can thereby reduce that contingency on the recommendation of our designers and our contractors. So this particular schematic design budget in the fall of 2023 was about 217. This is all in. This is consulting costs. This is furniture. This is IT. This is bricks and mortar. You name it, this is baked into this number. So we finished schematic design. We know where we're at financially. And I guess I should say, at this point, we also realized, and I used the term value engineering earlier, that value engineering was going to need to come into play. So we moved to detailed design. Really here, we let the fine tuning begin, and everyone, the consultants, the sheriff, myself, we start to roll up our sleeves to fine tune what this looks like. Value engineering. I think we lived by this mantra for a number of months. Need versus want without affecting long-term operations. I mean, the sheriff's office is making decisions on whether or not we had a call yesterday, do we want to buy a dental chair? I mean, that's the level of detail. What can we bring over? Where can we save money? I mean, every little bit helps. During the detailed design, we are working with a multitude of reviewing agencies, including the City of Paynesville. Last Thursday, we received our Planning Commission approval for our conditional use permit, our design of the facility, our demolition, and our temporary parking at the Chicago Title Building. We're starting to finalize architecture. The site plan, the sheriff's staff has kind of fine-tuned where they want various detention facilities, adult probation, detective bureau, training facilities, weight room. Those items are essentially buttoned up during the detailed design. Now we're starting to hear from interior designers, somewhat interesting paint colors, what type of wall coverings, ceilings, acoustics, from start to finish. Our first really, and we had heard about this, but we really get into serious dialogue about early procurement. For example, this is a 24/7, 365 secure facility. It always has to have power. We need 2 large generators. Right now, those have a 52-week lead time. So we need to bake in time to have those manufactured, shipped, tested, and have the ability to be put on site when the structure is ready for it. So steel cells, pre-manufactured steel cells, another potential long lead items. So during the detailed design, HOK, Gilbane are starting to put the feelers out there for us that, hey, make sure you have some liquidity, and we do, to potentially procure these items early. And we also have taken a couple site visits by this point in time. We went to Wayne County in Detroit, and then it was March where we went to Nashville, Davidson County, to look at a couple facilities and learn what works. I think maybe more importantly in the second example, what we didn't like. A very significant point of detailed design is Gilbane is now at the table. So at the end of 2023, we brought Gilbane on, and they've been in every meeting from paint colors to geotechnical analysis. What type of foundation are we using? The beauty of having Gilbane at the table is they've built these before. A lot of times the designers and architects will have a vision. Gilbane and their team can come in a respectful, professional manner and say, we don't think that's going to work, and here's why. So you have both disciplines at the table at the same time during the detailed design. Some examples of what we're working on detailed: we're really getting into the weeds on site circulation, pedestrian access, staff access, where deliveries are coming in. We worked with the city on bringing deliveries in off of North St. Clair, as opposed to Jackson and Erie Street. I think we have a slide deck of about 100 images on our signage program. Not the sexiest, most fun part of the project, but we spent probably 5 hours in a planning meeting talking about signage, both interior and exterior. The image in front of you is just a schedule of signs on the interior of the facility. I quickly learned that this is a science. There's a means and methods to fonts, colors, size, how high these signs are located, to ensure that we have the best wayfinding in the sheriff's office. We start to see our first cross-section of what the building will look like, what most folks are traditionally accustomed to seeing on a set of prints, and I'll expand upon this in a moment. The site plan begins to take shape. Now we are definitively seeing the paved areas. So in this image that's in front of you, we've got the outline of the footprint, juvenile court parking. They will net out the same amount of parking. We will not lose any parking there. Secure parking for the sheriff's folks, secure parking at the rear. A lot of lessons learned. Currently, you can walk right up to the sheriff's walls. That will no longer be an option. In the new facility, there'll be an 8-foot, hopefully an 8-foot, we have a variance request this evening, 8-foot secure fence around the facility that'll have access control. for sheriff's employees only or others who we give privileges to. We'll have public parking along the frontage of Erie Street, wrapping around Burger King, and also in some of the ancillary parcels that we've acquired on the footprint. Per the city guidelines, we have to start thinking about landscaping. So this is just a quick image of the vegetation plan, buffering, and so on. More than likely, and thanks to Mark Eiffelise and his team, we will self-perform the landscaping as we did on this building, which will be a fairly significant savings for the project. And probably the fun part, most exciting, now this building is coming out of the ground. So the next few slides will show some renderings as they show today. So we'll start, and folks have seen the site plan. We're at 3.5 stories, located directly across the street from the current jail. You see the sheriff's garage, located a detached sheriff garage. The parking, we see the relationship to Telcom, juvenile court. This is kind of the main access corridor for the Sally Port and so on. Here's the site today, a bird's eye view, if you will. And I hope everyone gets a visual of how the building, 240,000 square feet, will fit onto the site. Hard to see on this slide, but the red dotted line represents the county holdings as of today. Obviously, we also have acquired the Chicago Title Redmond building, which will be future parking. Phase-wise, the front three, I've called them, the former Ohio State University Extension Building, 125 East Erie Street, and Burger King demolition will start in the next 30 days. Asbestos abatement is occurring as we speak right now. I want to also note our relationship and collaboration with the Land Bank, the board, and John Rogers. We are doing a 50-50 cost share on this demolition, so that's a huge help to the project budget. This is what the structure will look like on site. So you see the buildings are gone. We have a 3.5 story, 240,000 square foot structure. Sense of scale, a super Walmart's about 200,000 square feet, so you get a sense of scale. Obviously those are 1 story, this is 3 stories. We get our first look at the perimeter fencing that I referenced for the sheriff's secured parking, kind of our Sally Port on plan left, ingress and egress, the connecting Erie Road, Erie Street and Jackson Street. And quite frankly and honestly, we don't know what our parking, when we all net everything out, will we need the parking on the corner on some of the parcels we acquired at St. Clair and Jackson Street? We have that. We future-proofed ourselves, so time will tell how much parking we will really need. What happens when the jail is occupied? Sheriff's in there, inmates have been moved over. Well, the current jail is planned to be demolished. So this rendering shows the jail less, the new jail less the current jail. Right now, we've programmed that. It's about 121 additional public parking areas. To my previous comments about how much parking will we need, not sure yet. We're meeting the zoning code, but the takeaway is we will have plenty. We will have the ability to add. We've had some great conversations with the city manager, Lake Tran, on is there a collaboration project anywhere in the downtown core to make sure that we have enough for our employees and our guests, and as the downtown continues to develop, additional parking for things like Party in the Park that's occurring this weekend. So this is the fun part. This is a rendering. Let's imagine you're walking from Arby's towards the jail, the current facility. This is that bird's eye view southeast. I just want everyone to take a moment to hopefully appreciate the materiality of the structure, the change in plane. It's not one blank wall. We have window patterns, we have pillars. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to mimic some of the design elements of Morley, of City Hall, of our buildings with the bricks. You will notice in the main entry, kind of that sandstone look that we have here on the Nolan building. The structure will be elevated on what's known as a plinth, and this image kind of gives a better feel of that. This is if the current sheriff's office is gone. You walk out of the door today, and this is what you will see. I don't think anyone in their right mind would argue that that's a jail. I think it's a tremendous representation of a prominent civic structure. So here you get a sense. They've got some renderings of individuals here, a sense of scale, similar to our county courthouse, where you have to enter the steps and get that sense of place. And we'll have our ADA requirements on the right side to make sure that we are an accommodating facility. Continuing our walk down the street, now we're walking past the sheriff's office today, towards Conrad's. We're on the opposite side of the street. This just gives you another perspective, looking at the right side of the building, if you will. Once again, you can start to see our attention to detail. We've got some concrete retaining walls, our landscaping. Here we have our ADA compliance. You can see here on the far right side of this particular rendering the secure fence for the sheriff's employees and others who they deem fit. Kind of take a drone view, if you will. This would be looking from, let's say, above the Conrad's building. As a matter of fact, the Conrad's is shown in the bottom of the image. This gives you a good sense of how it fits on the site and the surrounding residential neighborhood. You can see our buildings and grounds telecom facility on plan right. Continuing to swing around, this is the rear Jackson Street facade. I think it's important to note that we continue the architectural character on all four sides of this building. Maybe because it's in my blood, but nothing drives me nuts when I see a really attractive building and you drive behind it and it's cinder block. It's just not the right way to do it. We wanted to make sure we were in line with the city's urban design standards. So what you see here, once again, is we have a change in plane. There's indentations in the building, if you will, a window pattern, a mixture of materials with the brick. And what you see here, the gray, is kind of a pre-manufactured panel system that will mimic the main entrance to the county administration out here. Our first look at the central utility plant. While it may not be important to some folks, it's critical to the overall success and sustainability of the building. This is a street view from Jackson Street with appreciation and respect to the residential homes across Jackson Street. This will be a earthened berm and vegetated buffer. So this is looking at the rear, and you get a sense of the secure fencing in the trees. There's a whole cut sheet or specification requirement that the city has that we will meet to ensure the buffing requirements are met. Boggles my mind when I see tractor trailers today maneuvering through the current facility. We'll actually have loading docks for deliveries. I think from an operational standpoint, I've learned from the sheriff's staff that maybe we won't need to have deliveries as frequent as we do now because we're going to have ample freezer space, storage space, docks, and so on. So from a scale perspective also, there's some renderings of some individuals here to get a sense of scale. And you'll notice we've incorporated the architectural design even in our central utility plant. The next four slides are basic elevations. We've seen these. This is the front facade. This is the side. If you're standing at Judge De Leon's Juvenile Justice Center, this is a good representation of the topography that we are taking. So this is Erie Street here on plan right. We're taking advantage of that change of grade at about 10 to 12 feet towards Jackson Street. So this particular area will be where the Sally Port is. We will not have, those of you who are familiar with, on a busy morning, first responders, police officers backed up on Erie trying to get in this current Sally Port. This is the rear of the structure on Jackson Street. We've seen this. This is looking from the Burger King. Once again, you get a good sense of the change in elevation. This is a pretty neat graphic. We'll actually be presenting this tonight at this Board of Zoning Appeals. The red dotted line across the top is a visual representation of the height of the current building, the current jail. The zoning code is a 45-foot height requirement. We are well above that. There is a precedent with the current jail, but we'll use this as an exhibit tonight for our position statement for the variance request. And we'll also have kind of our setback analysis off of Erie Street. We want this building to be tucked up as close as we can to Erie Street. Not only is that a good urban design principle, it also quite frankly gives us room to buffer off of Jackson Street. Just a few more slides here. This is the level of detail that we're at in detailed design. This is materials. The designers physically shipped brick samples, glass samples to the sheriff's office for them to take out in the sun, and see what they liked. So we had to submit this to the city of Painesville. This has the manufacturer, the color of the brick, the tint of the glass, and so on. And so these may change a little bit as we finalize design, but all of these things were incorporated into our planning commission approval last week. So we've seen the building come out of the ground. We've got a good handle on the site plan. Now we get our 50% design development budget. As I noted earlier, we're at the end of design development, but we only have the 50% estimate. We're anticipating a 100% estimate in the next week or so. So now the building size hasn't changed, but we've got that number down. Because we've went to about the 6th inning of the ball game, we've eliminated a number of the uncertainties. So we have the ability to reduce that hard cost contingency to 8%, which is still a healthy number of about $13 million. And we've kept our 5% contingency and will continue to do that. So that at this point in the game, with the contingency reductions and some of our value engineering, we've reduced the budget back down to $205 million, which is kind of our working number right now. To that point, Joel and Zach and I have been looking at what other areas in the budget maybe we already paid for and accounted for. And we're still working through that exercise. But for example, the criteria architect, line item 3, 5.6, that has been budgeted for and essentially paid for. So there may be an opportunity as we gear ourselves toward GMP to remove that because it's been paid for, accounted for, so that, which is good news. Last two slides. I know you guys cannot read this. This is the timeline. All the three questions I get are, when are you starting? When is it going to be done? And how much does it cost? Well, right now we're in that 205, and how are you paying for it? We'll discuss that. Right now we're in that $205 million time frame. We are right now in in-depth discussion and analysis on the financing plan, and we'll speak about that. As of today, I had a call yesterday with Gilbane. Probably could see a construction fence go up in early to mid-November is when we could see a fence go up. Potential completion date at this point in time, and obviously we're still in the 6th inning, 7th inning of the game, is July 2027. So we're looking at about a 3-year window. And included in that, we have to think about training for the sheriff's guys and gals, commissioning of all the equipment, both HVACs, IT, access control, cameras, and so on. So there's a lot of work that will occur when a lot of folks will think, oh, the building's done. Well, it may look like it's done, but we got to make sure that it's running efficiently and all the operations are hitting the marks of the sheriff's office. But right now, construction completion is slated for July of 2027. Now, what we learned in this particular building, and it is baked into this figure, is we are in Northeast Ohio, and winters are either can really slow down a project. They have baked in weather days on this, but if we have a good winter and we can get this thing dried in, maybe that timeline can be shortened a little bit. What are our next steps? Well, we've completed the detailed design. I've talked about that. That is happening as we speak. We're working through our city-state approvals. Planning Commission last week, Board of Zoning Appeals tonight. Everything, Phase 2 documents have been submitted to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. They have a whole internal approval process. We are transitioning to our design build team. So essentially, HOK will go from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, and Gilbane will take the wheel with their team, which includes K2M, Lakeland Construction Group, and a number of other variables. When Gilbane takes the wheel, they'll be responsible for the construction documents, the CDs, so innings 7, 8, and 9, and ultimately issuing our guaranteed maximum price, our GMP. That'll be the large construction contract that'll be put forth before this board late summer and early fall. Simultaneously to this, we will continue to have the conversation on early packages. Should we buy generators? Should we order the cells that'll be manufactured in the United States? And we'll continue the site demolition process, so logistically we're ready to go. We will also, and we'll spend a moment on this, we are going to finalize our finance strategy. So in short, we're going to do a combination of cash, let me back up. This finance strategy has not been worked on in a silo. Obviously with Joel and Zach, myself, previously Mr. Matus, Treasurer Zurin, we've had meetings with Treasurer Zurin, Auditor Galloway's not here, the Investment Advisory Board, the Investment Advisor herself, from Eileen, our bond counsel, our underwriters. We've had numerous meetings on how we're going to accomplish this task. So we have, and everyone knows this, we have positioned ourselves over the years via proactive and conservative budgeting to accomplish, I think, this once in a lifetime, once in a generational project, while still having the resources to effectively run the 11th largest county in the state of Ohio. A couple highlights of where we stand financially. The only general fund debt that we have on the books, and I don't know how many counties can say this, and this is accounted for and will be completed this year, is the courthouse renovation project. $1.1 to $1.2 billion on an annual basis will be completed this year. If not, it's accounted for now. That frees up a little bit of money. Current cash position in the public safety account at the end of June was $75 million, free and clear in liquidity. We have $75 million in the bank right now to begin this project. We have a AA1 bond rating, the highest bond rating that we can get, and that is a good thing. That is going to look great with the financial institutions. We have our bond rating meeting here in a couple weeks. So we are, from a fiscal outlook position, we're in a really positive spot. Last year, the commissioners wisely passed a reserve fund policy for some of our accounts that will provide guardrails and limit the amount of funds that will be in there. So we'll always know we're going to have X amount of dollars in some of our revenue sources. We continue to see positive economic activity in this county, from not only the county proper, but developments in the city of Mentor, Willoughby, the townships. Joel just gave me a briefing on our revenues in the building department last week. We're well above norm. But we're realistic that things may reduce. But talked to Dave Strichko last week, chief building official. He's been in the field most of the summer just due to the volume of work we have. That's a positive sign. Our planning and community development director, David Rodacci, told me Friday we had 3 developments submitted this month in the townships. We haven't had that in a long time. Interest earnings are extremely positive, yet there's a footnote to that. We understand they've been above normal, but we still budget on historic norms. But obviously we will take these positive returns that we've seen the past couple of years and hopefully into next year. Sales tax is still a positive trend. Car sales, the retail impact that we have here in Mentor and in the West End, we still have a very significant retail base. These are all really positive variables in our situation. A couple other items that we don't talk about, but in the current jail, when it was opened in 1990, as I noted, we brought over 100 or so inmates at a 353-bed facility. At that point in time, the decision was made, hey, we could probably bring on other inmates and bill for those that generated revenue to help pay off the current building. We are not budgeting any money for that, but that may be an option down the road. Opioid dollars. The county has received some opioid dollars. Once again, we have not budgeted any opioid resources into this project, but if there are eligible expenses, programming, and so on that are in accordance with the One Ohio MOU, which is kind of the guardrails of opioid funds, we potentially have that ability for resources, probably in the programming side, the treatment side, the criminal justice side of the sheriff's operation. So this initial financing of a cost of $205 million, excuse me, as I noted, will be that combination of cash, and we're thinking we have a good chance, a good feeling about $80 to $85 million at the end of calendar year 2024. So going from $75 million to $80, maybe $85 million at the end of this year. So we will look at the cash. We'll do short-term notes and long-term bonds that will be callable after 5 years, based on market, based on our cash flow. We can use that $80 to $85 million, visualize or imagine like your home as your kind of down payment on a $200 to $205 million project. So if we have $80 million on a $200 million project, that leaves us with a delta of about $120 million needed for debt service. A lot of calculations with bond counsel and our underwriters. That looks to be about right now $7.2 million that we would need on an annual basis beginning in 2025 to meet our debt service obligations. To repay this debt each year, we're expecting, and we've had conversations with the county auditor, conservatively 1.7, probably more in additional revenue from property taxes. I noted the elimination or the fulfillment of our debt obligation on the county courthouse, 1.2, so now we're around that $3.2 million, which leaves us a delta of about $3.8 or so million. And so the strategy is transitioning from putting those dollars in our quote-unquote savings account, our public safety account, which we've done for the past 10 years, and transitioning this into the proverbial checking account so that we can cut that obligation payment each year. So we will have, so if we deposit in the numbers range each year, if we traditionally have deposited $5 million into the public safety account, moving forward, revenues being what they are, we will then use that or a portion of that to pay the $7 million of debt service in combination with the capacity that we will gain from the debt service coming off the books, increased revenue from the property taxes. We are currently in the final stages of this process and plan. We had a meeting yesterday with our team. We have a meeting in 2 weeks. We have the investment advisory meeting next week. In preparation with our bond call with Moody's, second week of August, Joel. That'll actually be a Zoom meeting. We're confident that we've positioned ourselves in the best extent possible with our existing revenues. We're in a stable position. That said, this will only be able to be maintained on a team approach through hyper-conservative budgeting from here on out, and then a great team approach starting with the county commissioners and all of our elected officials and department heads. We have worked really hard, not only on the planning and design, but also on the financial strategy to finance the building and still effectively operate the county on a go-forward strategy. So that concludes my remarks.